I am Iron Man.
As the first hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man became one of the most recognizable characters of all time. With electric high-flying action and a revolutionary take on grounded superhero stories, Tony Stark's debut film is now the standard for many budding franchises.
You're welcome, I guess.
But before Iron Man's arrival on the big screen, Stark Industries struggled to find the right spark. From false starts to full-fledged pre-productions, there were numerous attempts to get Tony off the ground before Robert Downey Jr. ever stepped into the suit. In fact, the fight to bring Iron Man to life nearly had nothing to do with Marvel Studios at all.
You've been called the Da Vinci of our time. What do you say to that?
Absolutely ridiculous. I don't paint.
Before the formation of the cinematic universe, Marvel simply could not figure out how to make a good movie. With a disastrous wide-release adaptation of their strangest property and some shoddy straight-to-VHS titles,
Mr. President! Thanks.
Marvel was in a spiral of fumbles. Hoping to remedy the situation with big-budget studio productions and auteur directors, Stan Lee himself held brainstorming sessions in his home throughout the early 90s. During this time, Universal Pictures considered a number of Marvel superheroes to put on film and fixated on hiring horror specialists to direct. Although James Cameron is now known for big blue adventures and romantic disaster films, his roots in horror made him a peculiar first pick for Spider-Man. Likewise, Stan Lee originally courted the Mad Elm Street maestro Wes Craven to tackle Doctor Strange. Although these choices might make sense with the benefit of time or good faith, Universal Pictures' decision to secure Stuart Gordon for Iron Man was utterly unhinged.
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both?
Gordon first got a start as the highly controversial theater director known to stage anything in the name of shock value, even if that meant getting arrested for obscenity. After turning to film in the 80s, Gordon gained notoriety for his low-budget but highly effective horror movies. Gordon's films were as far removed from the pages of Marvel as you could get. According to some sources, Stuart Gordon's involvement in the highly successful Honey, I Shrunk the Kids made him a prime candidate for the homebrewed tech of Tony Stark. But seeing as Universal had already tapped RoboCop scribe Ed Neumeyer to pin the proceedings, Stuart Gordon is still a strange choice for Iron Man. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your multiversal moods, discussions between the studio and Gordon eventually came to a halt, along with Craven and Cameron. Whatever Universal's horror-minded MCU would have been, it almost certainly wouldn't have felt much like Marvel.
I'd buy that for $1.
When Fox acquired the rights to Iron Man in 1996, Marvel was still biting the cinematic dust of its competitor DC Comics. Beneath the bat signal, several Hollywood stars had elevated themselves to silver screen royalty, and comic-loving celebrities wanted in on the action. Everyone from Nicolas Cage to Tom Cruise tried to get themselves into that Stark suit. These what-could-have-been castings made sense on paper, but lacked the Marvel spirit.
There are still terabytes of calculations needed before an actual flight is a
Jarvis, sometimes you gotta run before you can walk.
Before Iron Man finally found its way to the big screen, comics fans were the last thing on any studio's mind. In fact, even Stan freaking Lee couldn't convince Fox to tackle a comic-inspired take on Iron Man. Working with screenwriter Jeff Vintar in 1997, Lee hoped to turn Marvel's cinematic situation around. Together, the two wrote what is surely the coolest and craziest unproduced superhero script of all time. Titled The Iron Man, Lee and Vintar's vision is akin to the body horror of David Cronenberg. Unlike the wartime-influenced modern Stark, the Iron Man script featured a decidedly different Tony. A Cold War arms dealer turned mechanized first responder, Tony Stark 97 long abandoned any notions of using his Redeemer armor for violence. But after being mortally wounded by a sentient bullet, Stark becomes a cyborg horror show that would make the Terminator blush. In tradition with his comic counterpart, Stark keeps his identity a secret and instead gives public credit to his bodyguard. Later in the script, Stark mistakenly murders an innocent fan via his malfunctioning suit. A shocking scene which directly correlates to the infamous Demon in a Bottle Iron Man comic. Likewise, MODOK, revealed to be the film's villain, was written about as perfectly as a comic reader could hope for. His shriveled legs hang uselessly above the floor, Vintar wrote. His head must be 6 feet from top to bottom and at least 4 feet wide from ear to ear. His proportions are similar to a baby's, warped to terrifying effect. Although this Lee-approved take sounds like one hell of a good time at the theater, it still smacks of a studio trying to make sense of nerddom. In a lot of ways, it seems like everyone just wanted another RoboCop.
Your move.
Creep.
However unlikely it sounds today, the Iron Man script was eventually attached to Quentin Tarantino. Much like his once fabled Star Trek film, this pairing seems irrational at best and ultimately doomed, because by the time the new millennium rolled around, Iron Man was once again back on the market. After being sold to New Line Cinema, the studio set their sights on Joss Whedon to bring Iron Man to the big screen. As the director of TV's nerdiest hit, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Whedon had already staked his reputation as an avid comic reader. A notable presence at early comic conventions, the Whedon announcement felt like the studio had finally made the right call. But it was David Hayter who was ultimately chosen for the ill-fated New Line adaptation. And as the writer behind Fox's masterful X2, Hayter had some big ideas for Iron Man. "You want to try to mirror your hero with your villain as much as possible," Hayter said. "If it's the Hulk, you want the Hulk fighting some huge, powerful monster." As a massive indicator on what's to come, Hayter's screenplay featured a surprise reveal showdown between Iron Man and War Machine. But in the New Line version, there was one noticeable difference: Howard Stark.
"I'm limited by the technology of my time. But one day you'll figure this out. And when you do, you will change the world."
In the Iron Man comic series, Tony Stark is haunted by the death of his father Howard. A flawed and industrious scientist, Howard Stark is both the kind of man Tony aspires to be and dreads at the same time. He is the memory that drives Iron Man to his greatest feats and lowest moments, an irreplaceable and important aspect to his very nature. And without understanding that emotional drive, New Line's Iron Man nearly derailed the most crucial internal conflict. Pitting Tony against his own dad would have been a complete misfire. Even in a post-Burton Batman world, Hollywood just didn't believe that audiences would line up to see a second-rate superhero like Iron Man. Even when they gave the keys to Joss Whedon, they didn't understand that Comic-Con crowds would be literally transferred to theater seats. And one way or another, Iron Man once again fell through the cracks.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly, with this laundry list of character defects, all the mistakes I made.
Because the very nature of film development is so fraught with challenges, Iron Man truly had every card stacked against it. Fortunately for everyone, when Tony Stark finally landed on his feet, it was back in his home turf. Because in 2005, the Iron Man rights returned to Marvel under the recently revived Marvel Studios banner. And within just a few years, Jon Favreau's Iron Man finally gave us everything we could have hoped for. Rather than stooping to the overly adult dramatics of Demon in a Bottle, the MCU looked beyond its own source material in service of a rollicking good time. Even though his script never came to fruition, even David Hayter understands the power of 2008's Iron Man. How do you retain the fun of it and the audience sympathy when the lead character is an alcoholic? Robert Downey Jr. was so perfect for that because he had his own issues there, and yet he remains so charming and so lovable and charismatic.
But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
By literally going through development hell, the MCU learned what makes Iron Man work, and we thank our lucky stars for that. And that, my friends, is it for this week's episode. Which unmade version of Iron Man do you find most compelling? Let us know in the comments, and as always, be sure to like and subscribe to keep up with all our Nerdstalgic videos.